We're live.
We are live. Hello. Tom Krause here with Passion and Hard Work with my co-host, Brian O'Hara. Oh, are you a minority or woman seeking to make a break into the information security field, cybersecurity field? With the demand on cybersecurity professionals on the rise, now's the perfect time to consider a career shift into this field. So welcome to Cyber Risk Ready. In today's special episode of our Passion and Hard Work series, Brian and I and our distinguished guest, Mr. Clifford Clark, discuss strategies for unlocking cybersecurity paths and opportunities for minorities and women and how to get started. So whether you're just starting or looking to take your career to the next level, passion and hard work is the ultimate game changer. We'll explore how these traits fuel innovation and help overcome challenges and create opportunities for growth in this ever-evolving field. So get ready to be inspired and discover how to harness your determination and achieve greatness. Let me introduce our guest, Mr. Clifford Clark. Clifford is president and principal consultant with C2 IT Advisors, a strategic information technology advisory firm. C2 IT Advisors provides IT SWOT analysis, virtual CIO services, enterprise project management, and IT organizational evaluations. Mr. Clark holds several IT certifications and an MBA from Indiana Tech. He leads a regional CIO forum. He's a Indiana InfraGard Educational Facilities Sector Chief and is a FBI Citizens Academy alumni. He's active in many social communities, promoting the next layer of leadership. Welcome, Clifford. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Yep. Welcome, Brian. Again.
Hi, Tom. Hi, Clifford. Thanks for being with us today, Clifford.
Not a problem. Looking forward to the discussion.
Great.
You want me to take off, Tom?
Yeah, please go ahead.
All right. So, Clifford, again, thanks for coming with us. I know how incredibly busy you are working on your PhD and running your various things that you do. You have your fingers in many things, just like I did for years. I wanted to start off the conversation this morning talking a little bit about what the current state of, and for lack of a better term, because it's been sort of colloquialized, DEI or diversity, equity, and inclusion. And excuse me, we'll talk a lot about the shifts that are occurring in the sands at the moment, but talk to us a little bit about how you see the current state of that for minorities and women in cybersecurity. What are your thoughts and conversation on that?
Yeah, the count or the percentage of women and minorities, or say any minority group, whether women or African Americans or otherwise, are generally low in the grand scheme of information technology. So in information technology field alone, you will only find maybe about 10% that in combination of women, any of the minority groups altogether, they only show up as about 10%. Cyber gets even tighter. The numbers would suggest that that's even as low as 3% for either of those groups. So if you're, there's maybe only about 3% women, maybe only about 3% minorities, specifically in cybersecurity. So pretty low, unfortunately.
Well, and so as we look at that, my next question on the list here for you is, what do you see as the barriers to overcoming that? Because those are pretty drastically low numbers compared to what you hear about and read about in the media about there being an critical shortage of cybersecurity professionals in the field. What do you see as the barriers to those to overcoming those kinds of numbers?
Yeah, I see several barriers, quite honestly, and I don't want to shorten any of those barriers, but one of them is, in fact, exposure. Oftentimes we say, we do and act on what we see, and when we see it, we believe that it can happen. So, one, having examples or having mentors or being exposed to are all very, very important features of getting more people into the pipeline, as we say. And it's really a numbers game. Oftentimes we talk about how many people are actually being encouraged to go into those fields. And unfortunately, we still have a scenario where educators and teachers may have, and even parents too, may have a lower expectation of what, say, a girl child or a Black child might be able to accomplish, and they may not promote that, and thus, they might promote other skill sets or other opportunities or vocation.
Yeah. So in colloquial terms, I need to see people that look like me.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, exactly.
What I see, I believe, and that's basically it. And the reality is that they don't see a lot of information technology professionals, particularly in the cyber environment, and that's a problem.
And Tom and I were discussing before the show started about how one of the I believe one of the strategies to overcoming that is you can implement all the DEI programs you want in the world, but it really takes commitment from professionals to make the effort to include those people and to encourage those people and to mentor and sponsor those kinds of folks into the area. So we'll talk a little bit about that later. Tom, you look like you got a question.
Well, I do. One of the things that I've recognized that, doing coaching and things along those lines is that, there are just tons of biases out there. And, it's not, it's, not specific to, to minorities or women, but people look at life through their own lens, how they've been brought up and what different things mean to them based on that upbringing. And, without a baseline of understanding about how to expand that, right, it's very easy to get caught up in a situation that, people don't understand, or they just don't recognize actually what's going on, recognize their behaviors and how they're interacting with folks and what kind of messages they're sending.
And I think that's absolutely true. Unfortunately, unless it's kind of called out or some light is put on that particular issue,
Right.
Unfortunately, people just go along thinking that what they believe is in fact true, when it is absolutely not true. And in fact, and it's kind of funny, in my personal opinion, we're going through a time at this point where we are over focused on DEI as a program, unfortunately, where I think that we do have opportunities, and people are saying, well, you don't need a DEI program, or we're talking anti-woke, and I know we'll get a little bit more into this later on, but the bottom line is that we keep fishing in the same pond, right?
The same spot.
And we're expecting different fish, right? We're expecting even more fish. I mean, just to talk about the volumes of the need to have people in information technology and cybersecurity, right? Well, you know what? There's a whole ocean over there of people that don't look like you that could satisfy your need, and we just still are locked in our framework that we will not go over to that other lake and fish in it.
Right. Yeah. Again, and I experienced this firsthand when I was teaching at Ivy Tech. In particular, there was a young Black man in my class who was, and I say young because he was only in his late teens, who not only hadn't seen anyone like himself succeed in these areas, he also had some normal teenage anxiety about not feeling confident about his abilities to do things. They're kind of a blend of those two things together, I found, with this individual. And just by simply taking the time to talk and find out what's going on and show some encouragement, this kid not only graduated with honors from Indiana Tech after being a low C student, to going on to a 4-year degree at Indiana Tech, your alma mater, Clifford, and went to work as a senior engineer for Cisco, one of the largest companies in the world. So that's one of the stories I like to tell, because it's real indicative of just simply taking the time to find out what's going on with your students. And I didn't do any special mentoring stuff. All I did was talk to the young man. And I think sometimes that we overlook the barriers that those folks have that we didn't encounter, so that it doesn't register with us. Does that make sense, Clifford?
It does, and you're speaking to both implicit and explicit bias that we all have, right? And everyone has it, right? Based on their lived experience, based on what they've kind of grown up with, And there's been study after study, of information that presents where faculty might treat, say, a white male student different than they might even treat a white female student, right?
Exactly.
That we encourage math and science amongst our young men, but we didn't encourage it amongst our, young ladies. And they grow up with a sense of, well, I can't do math, right? Or I'm not going to be an engineer. And as you know, Brian, again, coming from Indiana Tech, we got a great engineering program, and I love seeing the young students. We've got great bio, met, and cybersecurity programs, and the diversity of people in those programs are really, truly exciting. But we have to get over some of our bias.
Right. And remember that that's just one little drop in the bucket, that there's thousands of schools out there with millions of students.
Absolutely.
We need mentoring and support and encouragement. And, we have to teach the teachers how to do that in a way that's effective. It's interesting that the numbers you shared too, Clifford, with all of the talk and money being thrown at STEM, not having had an impact on that. I don't know if those numbers have changed at all, if the needle has moved, but I suspect it hasn't, unfortunately. With all the money that we're throwing at STEM, still goes to the same thing. It still goes to the young white boys. It still still does not go to young women or young people of color. And I think we have to work harder. We have to make a personal commitment to change that.
Yeah, and I definitely think we have to make a personal commitment to make some changes. And so we have another issue and problem that we have, particularly in tech, but that's not the only industry. And the certain industries are just not welcoming to diverse candidates, right? As an example, construction is not welcoming to females, right? Unfortunately, right? And information technology is, and there is some carve outs, right? And say a carve out might be Asian, or a carve out might be Indian, of Indian descent. Like say from India, there might be some exclusions there, but the bottom line is that the bias again kicks in, and they're just not welcoming to, say, blacks or even women or folks that kind of even think differently. One of the other things that's been happening, both Google and Microsoft have been looking at individuals on the autism spectrum, and finding that they're great analysts. They really dive in and focus, right? Those individuals would be discounted before. Oh, they're just weird, and wouldn't hire them. Now we're getting a little bit more. So back to the STEM fields, we definitely have an opportunity. But once they graduate, once they get their papers, then we have to welcome it into the house. And that's even a little bit on the whole psychological safety standpoint. They may have gotten all their paper and credentials and stuff like that. They've proven academically that they can do the work, but they don't feel safe moving forward in that field. And unfortunately, many of them decide to do something else more expected, instead of advancing their education or advancing in the field that they were educated in.
Sure. But Clifford, can you talk a little bit more about the psychological safety, piece of it? Because it strikes me that it's a lot more. There's a lot of layers for that. When you look at things that are happening, in our middle schools and high schools, and preparing students for cyber or some type of tech job, and those behaviors and things roll into, I think, the college level. And unless there's a mentor there or somebody that's able to get past that shell, and help people feel comfortable, that just rolls over into the professional world. So can you share some insights on that?
Yeah, absolutely. And some listening, and you may already know, there's generally like 4 stages of psychological safety. There's actually a 5th stage, which is outside, right? You're not you're not feeling safe at all, so you don't do anything. But you may have the first step of just feeling safe that you're included. And you might say that this is, and I'm not the owner of this analogy, but stick with me on it. This is, well, at least you were invited to the party, okay? But you're still on the wall, okay? Then the next is, hey, I'm ready to be that learner. I feel safe in learning. So I can ask questions, right? I feel that if I ask the wrong question, I'm not going to die. My career is not over. I can still advance. So now you're at the party and maybe you're starting to get up a courage enough to say, hey, would you care to dance? And then the next stage is being able to be a contributor, so that now you've asked questions. Now you're starting to formalize thoughts, and you're going to make a suggestion. And there's a little safety margin there about being able to make a suggestion without, again, feeling that your suggestions will be discounted or anything else like that. And then, of course, that might be, now you're actually out there dancing a little bit. And then the final phase is that challenger safety. And that is the top level of saying, hey, you can actually look across the room now and say, hey, how's that person dancing? Or not just about you now, that maybe in the business world, it might be having some level of criticism of your peer without feeling that you're going to die on the vine because of that. And missing that psychological safety is a problem, because people who are already considered in the out or excluded group don't feel comfortable moving forward to the other stages of psychological safety. I hope that helps you.
It does. Yeah, it does.
It's interesting that you said that, Clifford, too, and that you use the term out, because what we haven't discussed here is the gay, transgender, LGBTQA plus community as well, which that model fits to extremely well in terms of feeling safety. So I want viewers to know that it's not that we've overlooked that segment of the population. We just wanted to focus this particular session in on minorities and women. Clifford, I think Clifford's camera froze.
Okay. Well, what I'll do is, he's kind of working through that process. I will.
Yeah.
There we go. Are you back?
Yeah, I'm back. Well, I think I'm back. I still see. There we go. I'm back now. So, Brian, you make an excellent point. And Brian, we know each other, so you know a little bit about some of the things that I've been working on and studying. There are different conversations of how people try to protect themselves against to gain psychological safety. One of them is covering, right? And we often talk about the word being out, meaning that, okay, I'm feeling safe enough to be who I am, being authentic me, and being who I am without fear of repercussion. That is oftentimes is considered being out. And again, we often talk about that in gender roles and things of that nature. However, it's the same even when it comes to psychological safety of being in any out group, a minority group, a women's group,
exactly,
like that. So we do some degree of covering, right? And so we try to cover the best we can some of the things that we can. Certain things are obvious that we cannot cover. We can't cover the fact of our gender generally, and we can't cover the fact of our ethnicity generally, right? Because there are people who are of African-American descent that pass as being white, as an example, right? So that it's not 100%, but it's pretty high. And then also, we might code switch. Code switching is fundamentally about language and how we talk and communicate with each other. And say, like myself, speaking, as we say, the king's or the queen's English, when somebody's talking with me on the phone may not necessarily give away the fact that I'm African American. They may not be able to pick that up. Maybe they can, maybe they can't. And that might be different based on, say, if I were maybe talking with more euphemisms or cliches or something like that, that might give away where my ethnicity might be. So the actual bringing up the covering is an excellent point. And I'm sorry for going so academic on you guys.
No, that's okay. That's all good stuff.
Yeah, it's very interesting.
I interrupted you, Tom. You were going to ask something, I think.
Well, I was just going to make a comment on the psychological safety piece. There's a book called The 4 Stages of Psychological Safety, and by Timothy Clark. I have it sitting here on my desk, so I was looking to make sure I got it right. And so I'll put a link to that down in the comment section at the end of the show. So
Yeah, I think that and again, I didn't create the dance analogy, but it's a pretty good one to kind of help people understand of not even being invited to the party, all the way up to being able to look at somebody else dancing across the floor and not feeling that you're going to get kicked out of the party.
So, Clifford, sorry, yeah, Clifford, let me just ask. So, from an educational standpoint, when we're looking at the context of biases maybe and how educators engage, and being able to have the resources available to them to be able to understand what that is, provide those technical mechanisms or those trainings in whatever that framework looks like. What kind of options do educators have to kind of help get past all these things? Just, I mean, I know a lot of educators, they want to do the right thing, but oftentimes, they're influenced by, government requirements or whatever that is, or they don't know what to do.
Yeah. So like, here's what I suggest. And I say this to a lot of people, right? Get in your boat, paddle to the shore, take your boat to a new lake and put the boat in. So there are various different organizations that teachers and instructors, facilitators, professors can go to get a better sense of the availability and pool of people. As an example, NSBE, the National Society of Black Engineers, BDPA, Black Data Processing Associates, ITSMF, the Information Technology Senior Management Forum. There are other professional organizations that have primarily women in tech. There's just so many of them out there. Leave your comfort zone and go to a different lake, join that organization, attend that meeting, listen to what's happening, be informed. Those are ways to help bridge that gap and tackle those bias. And what I feel, I'll stop there, not talk about what I know, but I'll talk about what I feel, is that when people do that, they will start to understand that their bias that they may have had is unfounded.
Interesting.
So
thanks for sharing those resources.
Yeah. So my next question for you, you've talked around a little bit, Clifford, is talk to us a little bit more about the role of mentors and advisors. And like I said, you've already talked to some of that, but draw us a picture, if you will, of a better way for us to mentor those minorities and women and LGBTQTs in our community, in our educational institutions, in our job sites.
Yeah, I think one of the things that we can do is we can set up an environment that is proverbially a safe space, right? That any individual, right? Because I'm going to take one quick tangent. A lot of times people complain about diversity, equity, and inclusion programs without first understanding that those programs do not exclude anyone, that everyone benefits from it. As an example, when they when you put the button to open the door, it doesn't matter whether you're able-bodied or not, it's available to you. And even if you're able-bodied and you're carrying groceries in both hands, you could bump it with your hip, open the door and go through. When we put in programs to help the least amongst us, we help the most people. So, okay, saying that, getting that out of the way, back on the main question. What happens is that we can create environments where we have a safe space, right? That anybody can come and talk about their issues. That's one. Number two, we need to have examples. And as I mentioned before, you're in a rural school in the middle of, Indiana or somewhere. You may not have a whole bunch of diversity in your school, but maybe you can find things on the internet or anything else, or even in a neighboring urban school to say, let's partner, right? Let's get these exposures happening. I think we could do that. And the same thing with finding mentors and finding individuals. I think I feel that many people who have is back to Maslow's hierarchy, right? Many people who have become successful want to help. They want to help the next generation. And that's one thing that I try to do with a variety of different things. They want to help.
So can you give us some pointers on how to do that more effectively?
Yeah. Again, I think that one is just maybe if you're an instructor or a facilitator, at a school or something like that, maybe just research and find out what's around and available. Maybe there's an organization, a company or something like that in your area that may have a few individuals that are slightly different, more diverse than your standard. Ask them to come in and talk to the class about what it is that they do. I think that you will see that there are examples of these individuals around. And once you connect with them, like I said, even with the organizations that I mentioned, once you connect with them, you have an opportunity to have a pipeline of diverse talent to come and talk, and they can tell their story, how they got involved, why they're excited about it, and so on and so forth. And those are mechanisms to kind of help the educational staff.
What are your thoughts about this? This wasn't included in the list of questions, Tom, but I'm curious what your thoughts are, Clifford, because you and I have known each other for well over 10 years now, probably closer to 15, about organizations that aren't necessarily designed to be inclusive, getting them to be so. And what comes to mind is the ISSA chapter in Fort Wayne in particular, in terms of making an effort, because everything that I read, everything that I've heard you say translates into my head as I need to make an effort. This isn't going to happen by natural forces. It's going to require effort because people are, I hate to say it, but I guess we're basically lazy. We don't like to do things unless there's something in it for us.
Well, there is a law of preservation or conservation, I think is the technical word for it, right? And so we don't want to expend any more energy on anything than we have to, right?
Exactly.
Given our own natural instincts, we'd sit on the couch and eat potato chips and watch TV. I mean, if we didn't have, so basically we got to get uncomfortable. Right. And we gotta be able to get uncomfortable. And really back to some of the things that I already said. When you I'm involved with an organization. I won't say the name because I don't want to embarrass the organization. But when I started in the organization, I will tell you that I really didn't feel I had anything in common with the majority of the people there. And when I say the majority, I'm talking 99% of the people, right?
Sure.
Just a slight, we had a similar passion, but that's probably about where the line was drawn. So part of on the other side, putting some of it on the other side, we do have to have some degree of grit, right? And that Tammy Duckworth, the book, a doctor, I think she's a doctorate at this point. But the bottom line is that the candidate needs to have some degree of grit to kind of stick with it. But that they can find an ally to help. It doesn't even have to be push. It just has to come alongside and hold them up a little bit. We need to do that. So to do that, the organization needs to be welcoming. And as I was saying with this particular organization, I did not feel it. I did not feel it. So the person that I partnered with was the person that first invited me. And I confided in them. I said, like, I'm not feeling it. I'm getting ready to bug on out of here. Now, mind you, this was a private organization off to the side. I had no obligation to continue in it. It's like, but the bottom line is that I stuck with it, got more and more engaged with the individuals, had that person be the wing person, do the introductions, and we kind of did more and more things together. And I think that was very, very helpful. Again, going to other locations to shop and Brian, I sit on quite a few boards, and it's always the same thing. Well, we can't find talent that meets this criteria. I'm like, well, where are you shopping?
Right. They cry about it all the time.
Yeah.
All the time.
Yeah. So I mean, on the side of the candidate, you have to have some stick to itness, some grit to be able to get through it. But on the receiving side, they need to have a welcoming environment.
Right.
And what, Clifford, I was going to ask, what does that look like? I think, for many organizations that don't really understand, or that they think they're welcoming, right? But maybe they're not, or they're perceived not to be, right? What does that look like?
Well, for professional organizations, like I said, sponsor a table at an event or something of that nature. Go to an urban school. If you're a rural teacher, go to an urban school. Spend a little time there. What it looks like is getting outside of your comfort zone, getting a partner, somebody that you can confide in, because our polarity is generally never 100%, right? You'll hear, well, I have Black friends. It's like, so it's never 100%, right? Well, maybe ask that Black friend and, family member or something like that. Say, hey, help me along the way. Can you teach me? Can you show me? Can you take me? That's what that looks like.
Thank you for that. Sure.
Yeah.
There's a few books that as I go through my own research and trying to understand the situation better. There's a handful of books that I've purchased and read that have to do with just understanding, and I'll put some of those links down on the show comments below at the end of the show.
If you've got some as well, Clifford, if you've got some resources you'd like to share with us, we'd be glad to put them up on the link as well.
I can definitely send you a few. I definitely have quite a few books that I've gone through, and I actually keep some of them right close to me on hand. So I'll send a few links. I'll send a few books so that you can add to the show notes.
Great. Thank you.
I find it interesting, Clifford, that we spend, I don't do it anymore now because I'm retired, but we spend so much time and energy when we connect with other companies in business to business relationships. We ask questions like, do you have a SOC 2 report? Do you have a disaster recovery report? But what we don't ever ask is, do you employ minorities and women in decent numbers? And I'm just curious, whether that question ever comes up.
Unfortunately, and I'll say unfortunately, it does not, unless there is some push to do that. And when I say that, right, a program of some sort, right? And I'm not talking quotas, because quotas is like the negative word that people like, but it's like, hey, it's like, let's at least think about the makeup of our staff. I oftentimes reflect on this old story that Ford created a car, and it was called the Probe, and it only was around for a little while. You might think of space and things of that nature, but it wasn't a good car for women because they didn't like the name. I mean, they just didn't like it, right? And I think that what companies and organizations have found, and McKinsey has done a great study on this, is that when you have a diverse employee group, you actually do fiscally, and I want to say the number is about 18% better, but there's arguments as to what that number really is entailed. But you actually do better fiscally, right? So having a diverse organization allows you to perform better financially. And the reason is that you've now opened up yourself to other ideas and figured out how to sell to other people. And the more and more you can do that, the better and better. Another great example, I'm going to forget the name of this book, but and we're all old enough, probably 30 years ago, maybe as much as 40, there might have been 2 flavors of spaghetti sauce on the shelf, okay? Meat and maybe meat-free, right? And that was it. Or maybe it was ground beef or sausage, right? And that was probably it. Now you go to the store and you have all of these different varieties. And what retailers have found, or manufacturers have found, is that having variety actually makes things sell more, not less, but more. And again, there has just been time and time again a value proposition for diversity. And although I'm not so sure we're going to dive too deep into this, it is disappointing to me personally that within our federal and state government, we are deciding to turn the clock back and try to remove programs that promote diversity. It is, in my personal opinion, fiscally and foolish and irresponsible. And that's just the way I feel.
Well, that was my last question, was going to be, with the efforts happening at the federal government level and at the state level with our own governor axing the DEI efforts here in Indiana just this last week. His first act as our new governor. Um, I'm just wondering what you think the future holds in the near term, let's say the next 5 years, rather than asking you what's going to be like in 20, when I
Yeah.
won't be around in 20. So,
I
and
I, you know,
what can we do? And what can we do about it? What can we do
yeah,
about it?
I think the next 5 years are more scarier than the next 20. I think that the next generation of young people are coming up and they're not buying into this crap, right? That diversity is bad or being woke is bad. That they are not buying that story. They've grown up with diverse friends. They're connected internationally. Another great example, and I know this is a tangent and I apologize, is that let's look at the diversity of applications for social media. I'm being very focused here, right? One of them has its challenges because of who has potential influence over it. Maybe if you're not getting it, we're talking TikTok. Okay. So what do people do? You ban one platform, they change
They
and
find
they go to
another.
another.
They find
Exactly.
another.
That's exactly right.
They find another.
Exactly, right? So diversity, diversity is very, very powerful. And people coming up these days, our young people are not buying into this foolishness that diversity is bad. They know the real deal. They have diverse friends. They've been exposed to diverse things. The world is a lot more open, and this, even in places where you think, and there might be only one place on this earth that they've still figured out how to keep people locked out, and that might be North Korea. But not even China can close off entirely. They're having protests even this day with their people that are saying, "Hey, we're not putting up with this. We're not putting up with this." And the Chinese party is not. They're struggling right now. So 5 years is more scary than 20. 20 years, I think we're going to have a new generation, and they're going to see things entirely different. So I'm optimistic. The only challenge is whether or not I'll be alive to see it. That'll be the challenge.
Same here. Same here.
But you bring up, a couple interesting points, Clifford, on that last comment, because, regardless of what type of state or federal programs are in place, people have to make a personal decision about how they're going to run their business, how they're going to work with their friends, and the steps that they're going to take to, maybe not compensate for the lack of foresight from a government standpoint, but just build, right? I mean, we need to be a community of builders, right? And by not doing these things, right, that is not a building block in my mind.
And not to pull a headline from the news, right? We need the best people no matter where they come from, right? I mean, and what I think is going to happen in the short haul, and like I said, I'm more concerned with 5 years than I am with 20, but in the short haul, I think there will be a realization that you're missing out, and that will have financial implications on organizations, companies, entities over a period of time. That and I, like, I'm going to take my ball and go, right? It's like, you don't want me to play on your field, fine. I'll create my own field, and that in and of itself will spur innovation and a realignment, and people will start to realize. And don't take my word for it. I mean, if you go into classic, mainstream media today, there is a lot of conversation about our capitalistic, democratic society that we have here in the United States and where it's at right this very moment in world history, and comparing us to other environments or not companies, but organizations. I'll just use the word, it's not coming to my head right now, senior moment, but other empires, I guess, if you want to use that word, that have risen and fallen because of what, choices that they've made. I mean, even when you think of some of our close societies, even like the Asian societies like China, who had 30 years ago, the one-child policy, and now they have an aging population and they don't have enough young people. Or, other societies like that. I mean, we have to think, one of the challenges that I want people to do, and one of the tools for cyber is critical thinking, right? And you got to think broad too. You can't just think short term, right? We start to micro analyze things when we should be macro, when we should be thinking broad. How is this, years out? What does pushing on this button do for another button, 20 years down the road? I'm sorry, I get a little passionate about the topic.
No, that's okay. That pretty much wraps it up at my end, Tom.
Yeah, no, that's good stuff. I appreciate your insights. We just have a few minutes to go, Clifford, but I wanted to get your insights on a couple of things. So, from a skill set, right? What is the one or two things that you feel that that minorities or women can do, right? That they should know getting involved in the information security space?
Well, definitely, I want to say that you can't give up your critical thinking. I mean, back in the days when I was coming through, we might be talking about logic, right? Can you think logically, right? Well, this doesn't add up, and therefore you would challenge it a little bit further. We got to do that. But right now, even as important are maybe some social skills, particularly both online and in person. You're going to have those things because you want to be seen as a potential candidate for these environments. And so those skill sets are going to be needed. And social skills could be, your communication skills, writing, your ability to work with people, your those types of things.
Sure.
Soft skills.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Right. Okay. What about last question? Favorite productivity tools, I think that people use. So what are a couple of your favorites?
So I have a few, and some of them are growing a little bit faster than I am. So I'm older, and so I like writing. So I have electronic ink notepad, right? And I consult. So I used to have a composition notebook for every client, and I was like, that was getting a little bit much, and now I have an electronic notepad. I am becoming more and more into the Chat GPT or any other AI platform. It's becoming obviously more embedded. I'm an IT person, so it's already more embedded in tools, whether it's Zoom or Google or Microsoft. And I'm using more and more of those features now. I'm also very critical of those features, back to the critical thinking, so I'm not blindly following down those paths, but I'm using more and more of those tools. So from an efficiency standpoint, helps me get work done.
Fantastic. Thanks for sharing those insights.
What's the electronic ink device used?
I have a Supernote, and the one that the reason why I got a Supernote is because I'm a geek. And the other one is a Remarkable. They're similar products, but the Supernote, the Supernote had a community of people that did stuff for it. And I thought that was interesting because you could always benefit, back to diversity. You benefit from the diversity of thought and thinking and development of all these different people, whereas the Remarkable was fundamentally kind of locked down, and I wanted to be able to benefit from that. And just as another example, right? I'm not and nothing against Apple. I have a lot of Apple products. I have an iPhone, MacBook, iPad, iWatch. I mean, I got all that stuff, right? But in the world, Apple ecosystem is only a fraction, and part of that is because they have their system locked down, whereas the dominant player in technology is not Apple products. It's where it's more open, and you can have more development and more creativity. And I'm not knocking Apple products. I love their design. I love their integration, and there's definitely space for them. All right, so I'm not excluding them. And as I mentioned, I have quite a few Apple products around me all the time and using them. But I think that you have enough diversity of thought and thinking, development coming from the other platforms that make those other ones work very well, and it shows by the number of people who have these products. So, just another example of why diversity is good.
Well, we're at time. Do you have any other final thoughts that you want to share with the crowd?
Well, I would just say that we should all be doing everything we can to encourage anyone to get into these fields. But I would say that it's even more important to encourage others who don't necessarily show that they fit based on some of the prior numbers, because
for whatever reason.
For whatever reason. And that's because you have a pool of untapped resources right there. It's like, as I mentioned, I use the lake analogy. You're going to a lake that's been seeded and the fish are just jumping out of the lake, and you're sitting there with your line in a different lake and you can't hardly get a bite. So there you have it.
Okay, great. Brian, any final thoughts?
No, I think Clifford's covered it pretty well today. Thanks, Clifford.
Okay,
appreciate
great.
you coming in and being with us.
Thanks
for your
Brad.
time.
Thanks so much. Well, for everybody else, so if you found value in our conversation today, like, subscribe, share, and we'll see you in the next video.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks.
Thank you.